get started here. Open it up with Burton in the second. A player that, obviously there's a lot of value there. He was at the top of our board. Really did a good job following the board and kind of letting it talk to us. Um, it was clear he was the most talented player on the board, and we think he's an electric player, playmaker, um, highly competitive, and the run after the catch is special. Probably best in this class. So when you add that to the group that we have, things get pretty exciting. Then we had the opportunity to trade back from 41. Um, we had a number of players that we were interested on our board, kind of looked at the needs that were underneath at the teams that were below us, and thought there was a good chance that we could add some bigs in that group. Ended up falling exactly that way, and we're able to get Ozzy in the boat. Um, it's a good conversation with a guy that went to the same school as I did. Um, his dad actually was on the same team as my dad at Boston College as well, which I thought was pretty cool, kind of full circle kind of deal. So um, Ozzy's dependable, disciplined, technician, very, very intelligent. He's tough, strong. We look at lean mass for the bigs. So a real dense player that can get movement at the point of attack, anchor well. Tall player that needs to continue to bend, but he's going to do a really good job. He's just a very reliable player for us. And then finish up at 62, which was part of that deal, flopping from 72 to 62 with Shamar Turner, a defensive lineman that we've had our eye on for a while. Plays our brand of ball, something that DA and JG and Bill Johnson talk about is playing with violence. And that's exactly the way he plays the game. High motor, passionate about ball. We will feel him on the practice field as well in games, and that's going to really, all of these guys are going to raise the level of competition in our building, which is a beautiful thing. So I'll open up to questions.
Right. With the first two players you picked, Loveland and Burton, they both seem like guys that fit really well with things Ben has talked about, and obviously that's your goal, is to give him the guys he needs. Can you give some insight as to how Ben influenced picking those specific players?
Yeah. They fit really well in Ben's offense. These guys fit well in every offense. They're dynamic players. But yeah, just going through, Ben and I spent a lot of time watching these players. Our scouts did a great job identifying them. And then we kind of talked about how they fit and what we're trying to do if the opportunity popped up for us to select them. And again, when you talk about run after the catch, you talk about separation, when you talk about creating explosives, all of those things are really positive for us to be a more potent offense and way more productive than we've been in the past. And also with a young quarterback, guys that you can get the ball to quick and they make plays after for you is a really good place to be, especially as a young quarterback.
You took a tackle in the third round last year. You take one in the second round, and you still have your two starters. How do you view Ozzy and where he fits in Quran as well? And is it possible that they're both backups at the start of the season?
Yeah, I'm not sure how it's going to play out. I know it's going to be a very competitive training camp and off season. And I know that at the end of the day, whatever best five come out of that are going to be the guys that are going to start for us. But as you know, trust me, as we know around here for the last 3 years, we've been going through a lot of different rotations and a lot of different people. So to have guys that are going to be reliable and dependable as things happen throughout the season is a good place. We want that depth. I think now those guys have really good role models and vets ahead of them to learn how to play this game at a high level.
Right, with Shamar, when you see some of the penalties he had, but you also square that with like that he plays with the style you want. How did you kind of learn that he can kind of harness that for what you want to do and be disciplined in what you guys are trying to do?
Yeah, that's part of it's just being more disciplined and playing selfless to know like when you do those things, you're hurting the entire team. We'll continue to educate him when he's in the building on that part. I think it's one of those things you want that edge in your defensive linemen and your defensive players and really all of the players. And I feel like if you can pull that back a little bit, that's a lot easier than having to push guys. I also think that is contagious. Like that group's going to be a real, especially with Grady and these guys, it's going to be contagious amongst the group. And I think we're probably going to have some real tough training camp days with some fights. So I think that's good though. It just raises the level of intensity for our entire football team.
With I know, is there some sort of blueprint you can follow? Just with like, I know Dexter came from a 2-gap system in Florida, and then same with Shamar at Texas A&M. Like, is there a blueprint just in terms of the pass rush stuff that you want him to like take on early on that you saw with Dexter that can apply to a young?
Yeah, that's a great question because we sat down and we were kind of split with that because it's very hard when you watch 2-gap guys. It's very difficult to see the projection. Usually a squared stance, almost catching sometimes rather than getting off and penetrating. But there are certain down and distances where they'll do that, and sometimes you got to go back a few years to kind of see the clips. And a lot of it has to do with traits, like just overall explosiveness, length, power, motor, those types of things. You can piece it together. And there's a couple examples of guys over the last few years that came from similar systems that we actually went back and watched the tape and it was eerily similar. That once they got in a different system, you could see them flourish and actually play to a whole different level. And that was specifically one of the things that we talked about with Shamar.
Right. How did you get comfortable with where his stress fracture is at, and how he worked through it last year, and where it's at now?
Yeah, so he actually he had a procedure to get that cleaned up, and the beautiful thing it actually settles us is he did his pro day, so you see him do a full D-line work. I think it was Joe Cullen from Kansas City did it, and Joe Cullen's pro day workouts are like exhausting, and he did it and did it well, so we feel comfortable where he's at, and obviously we have a lot of filters that we work through with our doctors. With medical rechecks to make sure that we're comfortable with where everything's at.
You had a sense with Burden that he's kind of got a chip on his shoulder just based on his production was so high 2 years ago, and he takes a dip. We can't read body language, but we could read tone tonight.
Mm-hmm.
He just kind of seemed a little disappointed that he fell to the second round. Like, do you get that sense that that's going to be the motivating factor for him when he comes in here?
Absolutely. I think anytime you're in a situation where you feel like you got passed by certain teams for certain reasons. I do think that chip grows on your shoulder and it ignites a different type of work ethic, a different type of mentality. The key thing is capturing that and making sure that it carries on. It's not just a flash in the pan type thing. Can we consistently put that time, that effort, that work in to be at a really high level? The beautiful thing about our situation, you come in, you got to compete. Like there's guys in this room that have played. Either Rome coming off of his year last year, to DJ who's played for a long time, to Duvernay, to all of them. Like you got to bring it if you want time on the field. And I think if I can't emphasize anything else, I'll go back to Ben's deal about being comfortable, being uncomfortable. Like there's some guys that are gonna have to grind a little bit harder than probably they ever have before. So I think it's gonna push everyone to be really good.
Ryan, can you speak to just how disciplined you all were in terms of just leaning on the flexibility that you created, allowing the board to follow you? Most of the time we talk to these guys, you guys have picked so far, like, yeah, I haven't really talked to the Bears that much, whereas sometimes in the past, we kind of had a feeling, or you guys, spoke about having a feeling on those guys and targeting certain guys. Just how strictly disciplined were you guys about just, hey, we created some flexibility, no matter if a guy plays a position that we have some other guys at the board, we're going to go.
Yeah, we've been really disciplined, and that's a conversation that we had going into this. We were going to just continue to bring really good football players in here. And when you look at the roster, like you feel good about really all 22 guys starting and playing in a pro football game. So when you're taking these guys, you know that it's going to increase the level of competition. You know that you're adding depth. You know that you're just throwing more talent, and everything usually settles out the way it's supposed to when you continue to do that. That's what I think really good rosters do.
Is there still any target at edge?
At edge?
Any intentionality of adding the edge?
Yeah, so again, I'll go back to the discipline part. We're going to look at the board and see where it's at. We did that before I came down here. We believe there's good players in a lot of different buckets. It's just kind of how it falls. We have certain lines and parameters and kind of guardrails where, all right, if we get past this guardrail or this line, maybe we need to see if we can trade back to accumulate more, to have more ammo to spread it out a little bit wider. If there's someone we really like, then we'll pick the player.
The last piece of the Bryce Young trade happened at number 39. How do you feel like you used all of the draft capital that you were able to get from that deal?
Yeah, I think pretty good. Yeah, I think it's worked out for us.
It's a good problem to have, but how do you manage all the mouths you have to feed on offense now with all these different skills guys that are gonna want some run in the offense?
Yeah, you know, that's something Ben and I have talked about. I know that's something he can handle, and he's going to have conversations with the guys about, just in terms of being selfless and doing what's best for the team. You know, we got to win football games, and I know that the more talent you have on the team, the better your opportunity is to win games. And we haven't won a lot of games here, so yeah, things might be a little bit different. You may not be the only person, um, but at the end of the day, the goal is for us to win. And in the contracts, all of that stuff, that that takes care of itself when you win. It actually, that's my biggest fear is winning here more than it is anything else, because that's when it gets really hard. And I've lived that in Kansas City before I came here, and I've seen that same conversation. There's one ball, and someone's going to be hot one week, another person's going to be hot the next, and we got to support that person. If that means you're blocking, whatever that means, you got to do your part to your highest level so that we can win football games.